Hello everyone. You might remember back in the days of Generation 3 Pokemon games, how difficult it was to encounter a shiny Pokemon. Between the base full odds being 1 in 8,192 and the broken RNG of Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, shiny Pokemon felt every bit as rare as 1 in 8,192, and sometimes more. But what if I told you there's a very simple and precise way to encounter a shiny Pokemon without blindly soft resetting? I will show you how using the game's RNG, or random number generator. This does only apply to Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, but keep in mind this video will only focus on Ruby and Sapphire, since Emerald is slightly different from them, and Fire Red and Leaf Green are completely different from Ruby and Sapphire due to this lovely thing called the internal battery, which I personally found to be a huge drawback to the Gen 3 games, except for Fire Red and Leaf Green, which do not have an internal battery, which is why they do not apply. The reason why this internal battery is important is because it must have run dry. Yes, it must be dead for this exploit to work, which leads nicely into what is required for getting a guaranteed shiny starter in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. This exploit is going to require a program called Pokéfinder, which will need to be downloaded, and I'll link the best/safest sites to do so. It can be a bit tricky to navigate as it has a lot to offer, and I'll walk you through which sections and tabs will be useful for knowing what frame a certain Pokemon corresponds to based on the player's Trainer ID and Secret ID. These can be found in the ID section of the Gen 3 tab. This can be broken down between Pokemon XD and Colosseum, Fire Red, Leaf Green, Emerald, or Ruby and Sapphire. That is the one that we will use today, and I'll explain it a little more in a bit. Just note this is the way to find the Trainer ID and Secret ID combo for your save file. Normally the frames are not consistent because they are changed based on the game's seed, but when the game's internal battery is dead, the seed will always be 5A0 in Ruby and Sapphire, which causes the same Pokemon to be encountered based on the game's frames, determined by the Trainer and Secret ID combo, and a couple other factors we cannot control. But what is a frame, you might ask? It is 1/60th of a second, or essentially a singular FPS. At any given moment while the game is powered on, the game needs to be able to produce a Pokemon in case the player starts a battle. This is where the frames come in. Let's say, for example, you start a battle exactly on frame 3759. When the game is running with a dead battery, frame 3759 will be the same Pokemon every time, once the correct Trainer ID and Secret ID combo has been found. This is even the case for shiny Pokemon. The frame breakdown is based on your game profile, which can be found in the static section on the Gen 3 tab on Pokefinder's main menu. This also appears in other sections. That's all the background information needed for Pokefinder at this point, so let me show you a practical example. This leads nicely into the next program that is required, some form of a specialized timer like Eon Timer or Mystic Timer, both of which are available online via different websites, or they can be downloaded, which I have done for Eon Timer like forever ago. These will have options for later gens, but we are focused on the Gen 3 tab. The pre-timer should be set to 5,000 for simplicity, and is a timer for when the game needs to be soft reset. The target frame is set to the frame that we know will have a shiny Pokemon, in my case, frame 3759. So let's see Eon Timer in action. I'm going to reset once the first timer hits 0. By default, it will beep 6 times as a heads up, but I will have it muted for this demonstration. I'll wait until I just need to press the A button to select the starter, and the timing needs to be perfect, so I must hit it exactly once the timer hits 0. This frame gave me the shiny starter. It is based on my Trainer ID and Secret ID. Normally the Secret ID is hard to find because hence the name, it's secret. But Pokefinder is an amazing program that does all the internal calculation reverse engineering work for us. So my Trainer ID was 36476 when I started this game. If I go to the IDs tab, when opening Pokefinder, switch to the RS Ruby Sapphire tab, check the dead battery, and type the Trainer ID into the filter section and hit generate, it will show some information. In my case, advances 6288, which in other words is the frame I hit when starting my game, which gave me the Trainer ID 36476 and Secret ID 36071. The TSV is not important for what we are doing, so disregard it. Keep in mind there is a possibility that your Trainer ID might correspond to multiple Secret IDs, This is where the advances come into play. Advances are essentially frames, and if you attempted to RNG your trainer ID, you should know approximately how many advances you waited based on time. For example, 6288 advances is a little under 2 minutes. 42069 advances is about 11.5 minutes. Usually it's pretty obvious which combo is yours, but if not, you can test it or try for a different trainer ID. Now, you'll fill this information into a game profile in Pokéfinder using Profile Manager for future use, and this will be done in the Static Pokémon Encounter tab, since the starters are considered static encounters. However, it will carry over to the other sections as well. It is to my understanding that my recording did not capture this section. This happens at a couple other moments in the video, so I'll provide screenshots of them whenever it's needed. This will show any existing profiles that you have made. As you'll see here, I have quite a few. I've had a lot of practice, and a quick shout out to I'm a Blissey, as I learned how to RNG shiny starters from him, as you might have noticed from my Sapphire 14002 profile. Highly recommend that one, by the way. Anyway, once you are here, you'll select New, and that'll pop up the profile editor to the right. Fill it in as I did here, and you'll be all set after selecting OK. Once again, in my case, unless you are using the same TID-SID combo as me, we'll see the different frames that will give shiny Pokemon. This is done by using the shiny drop-down and selecting either star, square, or star/square. These different options affect how the shiny sparkle of these Pokemon will look, I believe starting in Pokemon Sword and Shield. However, they'll all look the same in these games. Star/square is ideal because it shows all the possible shiny frames in the given advances range. Just remember that your seed must be set to 5A0 for Ruby and Sapphire. You'll see here I have 3759, 6288, 9402, etc. for possible shiny frames. And this goes for all 3 starters, not just the Mudkip. All of them can be obtained shiny this way. All you need to do is find a shiny frame to put into Eon Timer and try to hit the frame to get the shiny. This is essentially the basic info you need to get a shiny starter in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire using RNG. At this point, I will show you a start to finish walkthrough of an attempt to RNG a trainer ID and then how to find the secret ID regardless of the trainer ID. This will begin in the static section of the Gen 3 tab. There are plenty of ways to search for the PID or personality value, also sometimes called Pokemon ID. My recommendation is to find one with good IVs, which is a filter option available here. I'm going to aim for Advance 5679 and copy the corresponding PID, then go into the ID section from earlier and switch to the RS Ruby Sapphire tab. Paste that personality value into the PID filter, don't forget to switch that. It's likely that a handful of options will show up. You should be able to find the one you got the PID from. This will show you the trainer ID you'll get, and of course the secret ID as well. Now that we know what advance or frame we are aiming for, put that into the target frame in the Gen 3 tab in Eon Timer. But this is very important, sort of. Technically there is a delay that requires us to subtract 75 from our desired frame, so 5679 minus 75 is 5604. Although, it should be said this isn't technically required if you use the frame hit and update method, but you are very unlikely to hit it first try by doing this. But without further ado, I'm going to start Eon Timer and soft reset. You probably heard the beeping this time. I just wanted to give a sample of what it sounded like, but it should be much more clear when you try it for yourself. I recommend having a save file already set up so you can have the text speed set to fast. Then proceed to start a new game. You'll go through the intro and wait once you get to this point, and then you'll wait for the timer to go off. This is where you hope you hit it, but it is unlikely because it is called frame perfect for a reason. You have to hit the exact frame you were aiming for. Which I did not. We can check this in the IDs section again by switching to the trainer ID filter and inputting the trainer ID we got. This will show what frame you actually hit, maybe a couple others, but keep in mind your frame should be relatively close to your target frame unless you did something wrong. If you didn't get the trainer ID you wanted, you can try again using the frame hit and update method until you do. But I am going to show how to make it work with this trainer ID I got, to show you that you can do it with any trainer ID you get as long as the internal battery was dead at the time of getting the ID. So my trainer ID is 37505, And this allows me to find my secret ID, which is 40658. After you find your combo, you'll go to the Profile Manager on the Static section of the Gen 3 tab. Once again, I'll put a screenshot with my particular save file's information. Just keep in mind yours might be different, which is okay. Make sure it is correct to what the ID section told you. Even the smallest error will not let it work. I learned this on my Emerald playthrough firsthand. Now, with all of this information inputted and verified, you can select a frame for a shiny starter once you use the shiny star/square filter for ease. And I'm going to choose the second one available, 3365, since 452 isn't possible to pull off. There simply isn't enough time to get the game ready for it. Yet another flaw of this game's RNG in terms of shiny hunting. I still love it though. This brings me to my first attempt of getting the shiny starter. It's very unlikely to get it first try, especially without changing the settings in Eon Timer. You go into the options in the bottom left corner and go to the Timer tab. You notice there are adjustments depending on what console is being used. Since mine always defaults to Nintendo DS, I just use that and utilize the frame hit and update method. This is easier to use proactively once you know how many frames you're consistently off by. I recommend doing this as opposed to changing the settings in Eon Timer, but ultimately, it's up to your preference. Unfortunately, I did not get it first try, but this lets me show you what to do to improve your accuracy and thus your odds of getting the shiny. You can see that I am onto something here when I use the nature filter and the show stats option to find that I hit only one frame late. Truthfully, I wouldn't normally update the timing if I hit this close, but this is an example nonetheless to show how to use the frame hit and update method again. After hitting update, the lag box will change, which I highly recommend not changing manually. Just use the frame and hit update for that. But you'll see that we got a new timing from doing this. And let's see how it goes. I cut out the timer and got closer to the point of selecting yes. But you'll see here that I actually got the shiny after a couple tries. Mind you, I've had plenty of practice, but I'm sure you guys can get it after a good 5 to 10 tries if you're using the frame hit and update method correctly. And to be honest, from start to finish, it should be possible to get your shiny starter within an hour if everything goes well. Let me know how long it takes for you to get your shiny, as I'm sure it'll be faster than regular soft resetting. That is going to conclude this video. If you have any trouble or any questions, please let me know in the comments. I hope this helps your journey in getting shinies in Ruby and Sapphire, as this was a game changer for me once I figured it out. If you are interested in seeing a method of getting shiny Pokemon easily in Generation 2 Pokemon games, check out this video here. My name is Franzboy, and thank you guys so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.